humans were not following the scripts the aliens expected. They were improvising, adapting, and surviving. The Karolith fleet grew desperate. They fired all weapons at once, targeting multiple cities simultaneously. Energy beams struck power plants, communication hubs, and transportation centers. Explosions rocked the earth. Fires spread. Humans should have panicked. Governments should have collapsed. Armies should have surrendered. But humans adapted. Power grids rerouted. Communications shifted. Transportation and supply networks moved efficiently. Drones continued their deliveries. Even civilians, without full knowledge of the situation, followed automated instructions to safety. The aliens had no answer for the speed and resilience of human response. Ethan's software responded to the massive attacks, adjusting energy flows, guiding drones, and stabilizing networks. Minor failures occurred, but the system corrected itself almost instantly. He realized the program was not just a tool. It had become a lifeline. Every second it operated saved lives, prevented chaos, and protected critical infrastructure. Humans were surviving, not because of brute force, but because they adapted faster than the aliens could predict. Lisa's supply networks continued functioning under fire. Trucks and drones delivered essential goods. Hospitals received emergency equipment automatically. Shelters were organized without human oversight. Human systems had become a coordinated response without a single leader. Ordinary tools and routines were now extraordinary defenses. The Karolith, trained for organized armies, could not comprehend decentralized, adaptive action. Every second passed, the humans learned, improvised, and survived. In New York, Tokyo, London, and Rio de Janeiro, the same story unfolded. Cities burned, alarms rang, and explosions shook buildings, but humans continued. Civilians helped one another. Automated networks rerouted resources. Emergency services moved to critical areas. Drones carried supplies, repaired infrastructure, and guided people to safety. The aliens had expected humans to falter, but humans refused to fail. Every strike, every attack, only demonstrated the resilience of life. The Karolith fleet began to falter. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated fell out of formation. Targeting systems failed as human networks created unpredictable variables. Every attack the aliens launched was countered by human adaptability. Within 6 minutes, the fleet had lost cohesion. Communication between ships broke down. Capital ships were disabled by unexpected feedback loops. Centuries of preparation had collapsed in moments. Humans had survived against all predictions, using nothing more than ingenuity, preparation, and simple adaptive systems. Ethan and Lisa, still unaware of each other, continued their work. They were ordinary people doing ordinary jobs, yet their actions had become extraordinary. Their software, their logistics, their networks had turned into a shield that no alien weapon could fully penetrate. Humans had survived the first wave of attack, not because they were stronger, but because they were clever, adaptive, and unyielding. Across the planet, people emerged from shelters, assisted neighbors, and checked on loved ones. They had survived a fleet trained for a century in just 6 minutes. No armies had led them. No single leader had orchestrated the defense. Instead, small, thoughtful actions multiplied across millions of people had created a network of survival that no alien could predict. Humans had faced the impossible and survived. The Karolith fleet, scattered and confused, began to retreat. Ships limped back into space, weapons disabled, morale shattered. The century of training meant nothing in the face of human adaptability. The aliens had expected chaos, but humans had survived through improvisation, resourcefulness, and collective resilience. It was a defeat that no simulation had ever predicted, a failure that would take decades to understand. As the last ships disappeared into the darkness of space, humanity began to breathe again. People checked on each other, restored basic services, and repaired damaged infrastructure. The world had survived a near impossible attack. Ordinary systems, ordinary people, and extraordinary determination had saved the planet. Ethan and Lisa, though unaware of each other, had been central to that survival. Their work, done quietly and efficiently, had helped protect millions of lives. And in those 6 minutes, humans proved something vital. Preparation, adaptability, and ingenuity could overcome even the most precise and powerful enemy. The Carolith had trained for a century to conquer Earth, but humans had survived in moments, using ordinary tools and extraordinary minds. The battle was brief, but the lesson was permanent. Humans could never be fully predicted, and survival often depended on creativity, stubbornness, and cooperation. After the Krellith fleet retreated, the sky slowly cleared. The massive ships disappeared into the blackness of space, leaving only a few wrecks scattered across orbit and Earth's upper atmosphere. Cities were damaged, fires smoldered in some areas, and power grids flickered back to full strength, but the humans were still standing. The fleet that had trained for a century to conquer a world had been defeated in minutes. The survivors looked up at the sky, unsure if the threat had truly ended or if it would return. Silence replaced the chaos, but it was a tense silence, filled with questions and relief. His eyes were red, his hands shaking slightly from hours of watching systems adapt, respond, and survive. He stared at the screen as automated diagnostics ran over city infrastructure, checking for damage. The software he had created had done more than survive. It had learned, adapted, and resisted in ways even he could not understand. He realized that for months, even years, he had been preparing for ordinary emergencies. Now those preparations had faced the greatest challenge imaginable, and they had worked. He could not fully comprehend it, but he felt a mixture of awe, relief, and pride. Lisa Morrow walked through her warehouse district, surveying damage. Some buildings were collapsed, trucks overturned, and some roads destroyed by alien weapons. But the supply networks she had built were intact. Hospitals had received necessary supplies, shelters were operational, and civilians had moved efficiently through emergency routes she had designed years earlier. Lisa smiled faintly, knowing that her work had been more important than she had ever imagined. Ordinary planning, ordinary logistics, had become extraordinary defense. She had helped protect thousands, maybe millions, without leaving her office or wearing a uniform. Across the globe, governments scrambled to understand what had happened. Politicians, military leaders, and scientists met in emergency sessions. Satellites were restored, communication networks rebuilt, and reports of alien ships and attacks collected. Journalists tried to explain the event to the public, but words failed to capture what had occurred. Humans had not won because of armies or weapons alone. Humans had survived because of ingenuity, preparation, and the unexpected strength of ordinary systems. It was a victory no single nation could claim, yet every nation shared in it. In New York, a small fire burned in a partially damaged building. Firefighters and emergency crews moved efficiently to contain it, guided by automated systems that anticipated their needs. Aliens trained for a century to strike Earth and were defeated in 6 minutes. Sci-fi story for over 100 years, the Kelith watched Earth. They did not come in large ships, did not make themselves known, and did not interfere. They observed silently from deep space, hiding among the stars, learning everything about the planet below. They watched wars start and end, nations rise and fall, and humans struggle with both nature and each other. They studied how humans thought, how they reacted to danger, and how they organized themselves. Everything was recorded, every detail analyzed, every habit noticed. The careless believed they were patient. Their mission was not to understand humans for curiosity. It was to prepare for the perfect strike, the one that would make Earth theirs forever. The Carolith fleet was not a single generation of soldiers. It was 100 years of training, of breeding, of planning. Each generation learned from the failures of the last. Children were taught strategy before they could even read. Their schools were like battlefields in disguise, filled with simulations that repeated the same scenario over and over. Earth, the weak, unpredictable Earth. The best students became leaders. The best leaders trained new students. It was a cycle, a century of preparation, all for a single moment that had not yet come. On Earth, life went on as usual. Most humans had no idea that the Krellith even existed. News focused on the usual stories: politics, technology, sports, and local events. People worried about bills, work, school, and their families. No one expected a fleet of alien ships to appear above them one day. Governments had defense programs, but most were secret or incomplete. Some leaders worried about cyber attacks or minor threats from other nations, never thinking about aliens from another star. People celebrated quietly, with hugs, tears, and laughter, realizing they had survived a catastrophe that could have ended their world. No single hero saved the day. Instead, countless small actions, unnoticed by most, had combined to protect humanity. The victory was not glamorous, but it was complete. Ethan received calls from colleagues, friends, and strangers who wanted to understand what had happened. He explained as best he could, though he struggled to find words. The software had acted independently, adapting to situations no human had prepared for. He realized that humans had survived because their systems allowed for improvisation, not because someone followed a rigid plan. Lisa shared similar stories with her coworkers, explaining how supply chains had maintained order despite widespread damage. Together, they understood something essential. Ordinary people could achieve extraordinary outcomes under pressure. As days passed, investigations continued. Scientists studied alien technology, military experts analyzed ship movements, and engineers explored automated human systems. The world slowly realized that humans were resilient in ways no enemy could predict. Their strength lay not in weapons or armor, but in adaptability, creativity, and cooperation. Humans had survived, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they could respond, improvise, and refuse to fail. Families reunited. Parents hugged children they thought they might never see again. Friends checked on each other. Communities helped strangers in need. The ordinary acts of kindness and responsibility that humans often overlooked became vital. People understood that survival was not just about fighting the enemy, but about maintaining life, helping others, and adapting to challenges. Ordinary actions, repeated across millions of lives, had saved the world. Ethan walked through his city a week after the attack. Buildings still bore minor scars from alien weapons, but life had returned to the streets. Cars moved along repaired roads, shops opened, and people talked about what had happened. He felt a deep sense of pride and relief, not because he was a hero, but because he had contributed. Small, thoughtful actions mattered. Preparation mattered. Human systems, even imperfect ones, could achieve incredible outcomes when combined. Lisa traveled to different warehouses, helping coordinate rebuilding efforts. She saw trucks moving efficiently, hospitals restocked, and shelters operating at full capacity. She realized that her work, her careful planning, had become part of something far bigger than she ever imagined. She had been a quiet protector, one of many, and now she could see the results. It was proof that ordinary work, done well, could have extraordinary impact. Schools reopened, teaching children about resilience, cooperation, and problem solving. Students learned about emergency preparedness, about working together, and about improvisation. Parents shared stories of the invasion, not as tales of fear, but as lessons in resourcefulness. Humanity had survived a near impossible threat. The story became a reminder that survival was not about perfection, but about persistence, adaptation, and ingenuity. In distant parts of the world, the same story unfolded. Small towns repaired bridges, cities restored power, and communities shared knowledge. People understood that preparation, planning, and care for others mattered. They had faced an enemy that had trained for a century, and they had survived in just minutes. It was a lesson the world would never forget. No matter how prepared an enemy might be, human ingenuity, cooperation, and adaptability could defy expectation. Ethan and Lisa eventually met at a global coordination center. Months later, they shared their experiences, laughed at small mistakes, and marveled at how ordinary systems had saved lives. They understood that human survival was not about military power alone. It was about small, thoughtful actions repeated across millions of people, creating a network of resilience that no enemy could predict. The two of them reflected on the quiet strength of humanity, knowing they had been part of something far greater than themselves. The careless scholars studied their defeat for decades. They analyzed every move humans had made, every system humans had used. They realized that humans were not trained for war. They were trained by survival. Humans improvised, adapted, and found solutions where none were expected. The aliens had prepared for organized resistance, but humans had fought with creativity, stubbornness, and cooperation that no simulation could predict. It was a lesson the Corellith could never ignore. Adaptability was more powerful than precision, and unpredictability could defeat even centuries of planning. Humanity moved forward, changed, but stronger. Governments worked together, technology advanced to improve resilience, and communities valued cooperation more than ever. Ordinary people became the heroes of a story no one had imagined. They had survived a fleet trained for a century in just 6 minutes, not through force, but through resourcefulness, preparation, and quiet determination. Ethan returned to his software, improving it further. He understood that systems could learn, adapt, and help humanity survive. Lisa continued her work in logistics, creating networks designed not just for efficiency, but for resilience. Their ordinary lives now had extraordinary purpose. They understood the power of small actions multiplied across millions of people. They knew that humanity's strength lay in its ability to adapt, improvise, and keep moving forward no matter the odds. As the sun rose over cities recovering from destruction, people went about their daily lives. Children laughed, markets opened, and ordinary routines returned. But beneath the surface, humans had learned something permanent. Preparation, ingenuity, and cooperation were more powerful than any weapon. A fleet that had trained for a century had been defeated in minutes because humans refused to fail. And humanity, quiet but determined, would always find a way to survive. The world had changed forever, not because humans had conquered the aliens, but because humans had survived. Ordinary people had become extraordinary through persistence, preparation, and adaptation. Ordinary actions had saved millions of lives. Humans had faced the impossible and survived, and in that survival lay the true story of humanity's strength. Clever, stubborn, and unyielding in the face of the unknown. And in this ordinary human world, a few people were unknowingly part of what would become a key defense. Ethan Carter lived in a small city in the Midwest. He worked at a private aerospace firm as a systems analyst. His job was simple, at least on the surface. Design software that could manage disasters. The program would reroute power if a storm knocked out electricity, redirect transportation if a bridge collapsed, or manage communication networks when towers failed. Most people thought it was a boring job, but Ethan loved it. He loved solving problems before they became crises. He had no idea that his software, created for ordinary emergencies, would one day face an extraordinary enemy. He did not know that the systems he built would become a shield against an entire alien invasion. In a small office in another city, Lisa Morrow sat at her desk, staring at spreadsheets filled with numbers. She worked for a logistics company that managed supplies across multiple states. Her job was to make sure that water, food, medicine, and fuel reached the right places at the right time. Most people ignored her work, thinking it was just another corporate job. But Lisa took pride in efficiency. She studied patterns, found weaknesses, and fixed them. She never imagined that these same skills would become critical when the Corellith finally arrived. Lisa did not know she was training every day for a challenge she could not even imagine. Back in space, the Corelliths were readying their fleet. Massive ships, dark and sleek, waited in orbit around distant stars. Each ship was a machine of war, bristling with weapons designed to destroy cities in seconds. The fleet was coordinated by a council that had trained for decades, running simulations of every possible human response. The council studied human history, looking for patterns. They saw that humans were emotional, often divided, and quick to panic. They believed these traits made Earth easy to conquer. The council believed victory was guaranteed. Nothing on Earth could survive their precision and planning. Every scenario ended the same way. Human cities fell, their armies destroyed, and their leaders captured or killed. The council did not understand one thing. Humans were unpredictable in ways no simulation could capture. Humans made mistakes, yes, but they also improvised. They did not follow plans perfectly, but they found solutions. Humans could be stubborn, clever, and surprisingly cooperative when faced with a threat. The Corellith had ignored these traits for 100 years. They had assumed that emotional chaos meant weakness. In reality, it was a strength the Corellith could not predict. Ethan worked late one night, running tests on his disaster software. He was tired, rubbing his eyes, but something caught his attention. A small anomaly in the program appeared. It was minor, almost meaningless. The system had redirected power flows in a way Ethan had not programmed. He frowned, checked the code, and shrugged. He could not explain it, but he made a note to watch it in the morning. He had no idea that this small anomaly was the beginning of the software adapting to something no human had ever faced. Lisa, at the same time, noticed unusual patterns in supply-demand. Certain regions seemed to require more resources than usual, almost as if preparing for a large-scale emergency. She ran simulations, trying to understand why. Her analysis showed that if infrastructure failed in one area, other areas would automatically compensate. It was efficient beyond what she had designed. Lisa made adjustments, improving the system without realizing that she was creating a network capable of surviving attacks the likes of which no human had seen. The Corelliths could not know this. They had never studied human resourcefulness, only their weaknesses. On the day the fleet approached Earth, the sky was calm. No one noticed anything unusual. Satellites orbited quietly, airplanes flew on normal schedules, and children played in parks. Ethan and Lisa were both at work, oblivious to what was about to happen. The Carolite fleet emerged from the shadow of a distant planet, moving silently toward the blue dot they had studied for so long. Their sensors scanned every city, every military base, and every power grid. They had confidence. Centuries of planning told them that humans would crumble. They had trained for decades for this exact moment. Everything was in place. Nothing could stop them. But on Earth, systems designed for minor emergencies were quietly awakening. Ethan's software had begun to learn, adapting to anomalies and redirecting resources automatically. Lisa's logistics network started to optimize themselves, anticipating needs that no one had predicted. It was subtle at first. No human noticed anything. No alarms sounded. The planet looked peaceful. But beneath the surface, human systems were preparing in ways no one had ever imagined. Decades of human ingenuity, even in ordinary jobs, were building defenses the Carolith could not understand. The Carolith commanders gathered in their command ship. Their displays showed the entire planet, vulnerable and unknowing. They smiled, confident that the invasion would be flawless. Every ship had its role. Every weapon had a target. Decades of training told them that nothing could stop their plan. Their pride was immense. They had never faced defeat. Humans, they thought, were nothing more than ants. They were wrong. On Earth, normal life continued. People went to work, drove cars, and prepared breakfast. Ethan noticed the anomaly again. This time, it made a small adjustment to energy distribution across the city. He studied it, puzzled, but shrugged and continued his work. Lisa noticed unusual shifts in delivery times. She adjusted schedules, assuming it was a glitch in the system. They did not know that their work, their small daily routines, were laying the groundwork for survival against a force that had trained for a century. They were preparing without knowing it. Heroes by accident. The Carolith fleet moved closer, calculating trajectories, scanning communications, and preparing for strike. Centuries of training had taught them to expect chaos, but not efficiency. They expected humans to panic, governments to collapse, and armies to fail. But they had not considered the quiet power of human systems working together. The unnoticed, uncelebrated, simple systems that kept life moving were about to become humanity's shield. As night fell across Earth, Ethan left the office, tired and confused. He looked up at the stars, unaware of the approaching fleet. Lisa walked through her warehouse, checking inventory, oblivious to the threat looming in the sky. The world was calm, but it was the calm before a storm, unlike any in human history. The Carolith had prepared for centuries. Humans had prepared without knowing it. Both sides were ready in ways only they understood, and soon the quiet work of ordinary people would face the most extraordinary challenge imaginable. And so the stage was set. The Carolith fleet, trained for a century, approached with confidence. Humans, unaware but unknowingly prepared, carried tools and systems that could respond faster than any alien expected. The final moments before contact were quiet, filled with tension that no one could see. The century of preparation on one side would meet the quiet ingenuity on the other. The outcome was unknown. For now, only patience and observation ruled, as both humans and aliens readied for the encounter that would change everything. The Carolith fleet appeared in the sky without warning. At first, it was just a faint glow, a reflection of sunlight on strange metallic shapes. People across the world noticed the unusual brightness, and some thought it was a meteor shower or an unusual satellite. In cities, towns, and villages, people pointed upward, smartphones raised, capturing what they could. No one could imagine what was coming. Then the shapes became clear. Massive ships, dark and smooth, moved in formation across the atmosphere. The sky seemed to darken as they spread, their shadows stretching over cities, forests, and oceans. Airplanes were grounded, ships at sea slowed to a stop, and radio signals wavered as if something was interfering with normal communication. Panic quietly began to spread. This was no natural phenomenon. This was something different, something dangerous. On the East Coast, Ethan stood in his backyard, staring at the sky. He could not believe what he was seeing. Massive ships hung above the horizon, too large to be clouds, too precise to be weather. He tried to call his office, his friends, the authorities, but phones struggled to connect. Lines were dead, signals weak. He felt a cold sense of fear, the first real fear he had known in years. His mind raced. What was this? Why was it here? And what could he do? At the same time, Lisa watched from her warehouse rooftop, her eyes wide. She could see hundreds of ships moving in formation. Drones she had never seen before flew around the fleet, scanning the city. Her logistics systems flickered, screens flashing warnings. She realized immediately that something had disabled several local power grids. Her work, designed for minor emergencies, suddenly became critical. If she acted fast, she could prevent chaos from spreading. The Carolus began their attack quietly at first. Satellites fell out of orbit, communications dropped, and electric grids flickered across continents. Military radar picked up unusual signals, but many could not interpret what they were seeing. The aliens moved with precision, disabling key human systems in seconds. They expected human panic. They expected governments to scramble in confusion. They expected cities to collapse. But humans responded in ways the Karalaf had not predicted. Ethan's software detected the attacks instantly. It rerouted energy, activated backup systems, and adjusted infrastructure to compensate for failures. It was not perfect, but it was fast. The Carolus ships tried to target power plants, communication hubs, and military bases. Each time they struck, the human systems found another way to work. A substation might fail, but a network of smaller substations would redirect power. A communication tower might be destroyed, but others would pick up the signal. It was not the elegant defense the aliens expected. It was raw, decentralized, and chaotic, but effective. Lisa ran to her control panels, typing rapidly. She rerouted supply chains, adjusted transportation systems, and created emergency response routes for hospitals and shelters. Trucks that had been stuck in traffic suddenly moved in coordinated patterns, guided by software no one fully understood. Her network responded faster than any centralized military command. It was not designed for war. It was designed for efficiency. But now it became a shield, moving supplies, energy, and information in ways that the Karelith could not predict. In New York, in London, in Tokyo, human systems were acting automatically. Trains slowed to avoid collisions when signals failed. Traffic lights shifted patterns to prevent gridlock. Emergency services rerouted around power outages. Civilians, unaware of the alien presence, followed instructions from automated systems that had been quietly preparing for emergencies for years. Human ingenuity, patience, and improvisation began to create order where the Karolith expected chaos. The Karolith commanders watched in disbelief. Their screens showed a planet that should have been falling apart. Cities continued to function. Military bases were not destroyed. Human defense systems responded, but not with organized armies. Instead, they used every tool available: drones, automated vehicles, energy grids, and communication networks. The aliens were trained to fight armies, But humans were fighting in a way that was impossible to predict. Ethan monitored the systems from his small home office. Alarms rang, but they were part of his software, guiding him through each anomaly. He adjusted minor code parameters, but the program largely ran itself. He watched as energy grids shifted to avoid overload, as water pumps restarted after minor failures, as transportation rerouted around blocked streets. He could feel the pulse of the city through the software. He did not know it, but he was witnessing humanity's first defense against a true alien invasion. Lisa coordinated supply chains, moving food, water, and medicine around areas affected by power failures. Hospitals that had lost electricity found backup power automatically. Shelters opened as automated systems predicted population movement. Trucks and delivery vehicles drove themselves efficiently along routes Lisa had never intended for emergencies of this scale. It was chaotic to watch, but it worked. The human systems adapted faster than the aliens could destroy. The Corellas struck next, targeting key military installations. They launched energy beams toward command centers, expecting that humanity's armies would crumble. Instead, backup centers activated. Communications shifted to redundant systems. Field units responded, not in perfect coordination, but in ways that prevented total collapse. It was messy, unpredictable, and almost organic. The aliens could not comprehend the speed and adaptability. Decades of human planning, small software improvements, and countless civilian decisions suddenly became the very tools that resisted the fleet. In Washington, military leaders tried to assess the situation. Their radar showed a fleet of massive alien ships. Their satellites were gone. Traditional communication lines failed, but their local networks remained. City managers, emergency teams, and civilian software programs began operating independently, keeping cities functional. No one person was in command, but humanity was responding as a whole. It was not perfect, but it was enough to frustrate the Corellith at every level. Ethan and Lisa, unaware of each other, became part of a quiet resistance. They were not soldiers, generals, or heroes in the usual sense. They were workers doing what they knew best: monitoring systems, solving problems, and keeping networks running. Their work, built for ordinary emergencies, now became the backbone of humanity's survival. Every adjustment, every decision, every small improvement mattered. The Krellith could destroy one city, one power grid, one command center, but humans adapted. Humans improvised. Humans survived. The Carolus fleet moved closer, believing that total destruction was imminent. Their weapons fired, cities burned, and yet life continued. Alarms rang, fire started, buildings collapsed, but energy grids rerouted, water flowed to shelters, and communication lines found alternative paths. The aliens realized they had underestimated humans. Centuries of study had taught them one thing: humans would panic, but panic was only part of the story. Humans could be clever, fast, and resilient in ways no simulation could predict. Across the globe, civilians acted without knowing why. People helped each other, followed automated instructions, and moved through the chaos with a mix of fear and determination. A mother guided her children to a shelter. A bus driver rerouted through blocked streets. A volunteer distributed water in a city cut off from normal supply. The Corellith had assumed these actions would be unorganized and inefficient. Instead, they became the invisible shield that slowed the fleet's advance. Ethan watched as his software managed unexpected failures. Drones, built for surveillance and minor repairs, adapted on their own to help repair critical infrastructure. His systems redirected power away from damaged areas, preventing cascading failures. He had never imagined his work would face this scale of disaster. Yet, it was holding. It was more than he could have imagined. Lisa's logistics network became a lifeline. Food trucks that would normally deliver to stores now moved to shelters. Hospitals received emergency supplies. Water treatment plants adjusted operations to ensure safe drinking water. It was all automatic, guided by her oversight and software, and yet she barely understood how it worked. She only knew that the system she had built for efficiency was now saving lives in real time. The careless fleet fired again. This time, they targeted major cities simultaneously. They expected coordinated human failure. But human systems were not coordinated in the way the aliens expected. They were distributed, decentralized, adaptive. Failures in one area were compensated for in another. Systems designed for minor emergencies now functioned as an impromptu planetary defense. The aliens had not predicted this. They could not understand it. And each second that passed without total human collapse made them more desperate. In Tokyo, London, Rio de Janeiro, and Mumbai, the same thing happened. Systems adapted. Civilians followed instructions, automated vehicles moved efficiently, and energy grids rerouted. No single leader controlled it, no single plan dictated action. But collectively, humanity resisted. The Corellas were shocked. Centuries of training had not prepared them for this. Their simulations had failed. Their strategies were useless against an enemy that refused to act predictably. Ethan, watching his city survive attack after attack, realized something. The software was not just managing disasters anymore. It was learning, adapting in real time. Every anomaly, every failure, every unexpected event made it stronger. It was not perfect, but it was fast, and it was alive in a way he could not explain. Lisa saw the same thing in her network. Her supply chains adjusted themselves, filling gaps humans could not even see. The careless had prepared for war. Humans had prepared for survival, and survival, it turned out, could be stronger than war. The first wave of the Krellith attack ended, but the aliens had not won. Cities remained functional, energy continued to flow, and humans had begun to organize in ways the invaders could not understand. The careless regrouped, frustrated and confused. Their fleet moved to new targets, but every strike was met with the same unexpected resistance. Human systems, designed for ordinary life, now acted as weapons against an extraordinary enemy. Ethan and Lisa, though unaware of each other, continued their work. They were ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. They did not know if humanity could survive. They did not know if the next attack would be the last, but they acted, using what they knew best. And in doing so, they became the foundation of a defense no alien had anticipated. A defense built not on weapons or armies, but on human ingenuity, preparation, and the quiet determination to keep life going against impossible odds. The Karelith fleet had come to conquer, expecting chaos. Instead, they found resistance in the form of ordinary people, ordinary systems, and extraordinary human adaptability. What they believed would take hours of battle had been slowed to minutes of confusion. Humans were not perfect. Humans were messy. Humans were unpredictable. And that unpredictability, that stubborn refusal to fail, was the one thing the aliens had never accounted for. The Corella fleet moved closer to Earth, their massive ships casting long shadows over cities, oceans, and forests. Their weapons were ready, their plans perfected after 100 years of training. They believed victory was guaranteed. Every simulation, every generation of soldiers, every tactical decision had led to this moment. In their eyes, humans would crumble under precise strikes, organized attacks, and overwhelming firepower. On the ground, people could not see the ships clearly, but they could feel the change. Power grids flickered, satellites fell out of orbit, and communication networks struggled. Phones buzzed, radios crackled, and alarms went off in cities around the world. Panic began to spread, but so did action. Ethan Carter, sitting at his desk in his small apartment, noticed the first signs in his software. The city's energy systems were under attack, rerouting power to avoid overloads. What? He typed commands, but mostly he watched. The software had learned, adapted, and was already responding faster than any human could. Lisa Morrow, in her warehouse across the country, noticed unusual shifts in supply demands. Trucks and automated vehicles began rerouting themselves. Shelters and hospitals received priority orders. The system moved as if guided by an invisible hand. Lisa typed adjustments here and there, but much of the work happened automatically. She had created networks for efficiency, not war. But now her work became part of humanity's defense. Small, everyday systems had suddenly turned into shields. The Kerolith began their first strike. Massive energy beams fell from the sky, targeting power plants, communication hubs, and military bases. Explosions rocked cities, buildings crumbled, and fires spread. The aliens expected immediate panic, chaos, and collapse. But humans did not follow their expectations. Power stations rerouted energy to backup grids. Communication lines found alternative paths, and emergency protocols activated automatically. The aliens fired at one target, and the humans already had 3 alternative systems online. Every attack the Kerolith made was met with a response they had not predicted. Ethan watched the energy grids shift dynamically. One substation failed, but smaller substations took over immediately. Streetlights that went out were replaced by portable generators. His software calculated energy flows in seconds, rerouting power to essential areas like hospitals, emergency services, and transportation networks. The city, though damaged, continued to function. The Kerolith could not understand it. Decades of planning had not prepared them for systems that repaired themselves faster than they could destroy them. Lisa coordinated supplies with calm precision. Trucks moved efficiently along cleared routes, delivering water, food, and medical supplies. Hospitals received backup power and medicine automatically. Shelters opened as civilians were guided through safe paths. Small drones she had purchased years earlier for inventory now flew supplies across block streets. It was chaotic, messy, and beautiful in its own way. Human systems adapted faster than alien calculations allowed. The Kerolith had trained for organized armies, but humans fought differently. They fought with improvisation, resourcefulness, and determination. In New York, London, and Tokyo, the same pattern repeated. Traffic systems rerouted themselves. Emergency services moved to critical areas, and civilians followed automated instructions without hesitation. Power grids, water networks, and hospitals remained operational despite direct attacks. Drones carried messages and supplies to areas that had been cut off. Humans had no central command, but every system acted in concert, adapting to failures and filling gaps as quickly as they occurred. The Kerolith commanders were furious. They had expected disorganized panic, not efficient response. Their ships fired faster, targeting multiple cities at once, but every strike met resistance. Energy beams struck a power plant, but the system rerouted energy instantly. Communications centers were hit, but alternative lines were already active. Military bases were disabled, but local networks managed operations effectively. Each success the aliens thought they achieved turned into a new problem for them. Every attack made humans stronger in unexpected ways. Ethan realized his software was changing on its own. Every anomaly, every failure, Every unexpected attack allowed the program to adjust faster. It was not just responding, it was learning. It directed drones to deliver emergency supplies, rerouted transportation for safety, and calculated energy flows across the city. His software had become more than a program. It had become a network of survival, adapting and reacting faster than the Keleth could destroy. Lisa observed her logistics network adapting in real time. Delivery routes shifted as roads became blocked. Hospitals received critical supplies before anyone requested them, and water treatment plants redirected flows to areas in need. Every adjustment was automatic, yet perfectly aligned with human needs. The network she had built for efficiency had become a defense mechanism far beyond anything she had imagined. The Carolus tried a new tactic. They concentrated firepower on major population centers, expecting that humans would finally falter. Cities burned, alarms rang, explosions shook buildings. Yet, humans continued. Civilians helped each other. Automated systems rerouted energy, water, and transportation. Drones repaired minor damage, delivered supplies, and guided people to safety. The aliens realized their weapons were less effective than expected. Every strike caused some damage, but it never stopped the human response. Each failure of the Krellis fleet was a lesson humans did not need to learn. They had all already adapted. In Washington, military leaders watched the invasion unfold. Radar showed the alien ships, but traditional attacks and weapons had minimal effect. Civilians, automated networks, and local authorities were keeping cities operational. Human improvisation, once overlooked, had become the central factor in survival. No single person controlled the response, yet it functioned better than the most detailed military plans the Carolith had studied. The aliens had underestimated one critical factor: the adaptability of life itself. Ethan noticed the drones moving through the city. Small, ordinary machines originally designed for monitoring and deliveries now carried batteries, medicine, and even first aid supplies. They flew autonomously, avoiding danger, following paths calculated in seconds. Ethan could only watch, amazed at how his software interacted with the physical world. It was not perfect, but it worked, and it worked faster than any alien calculation could handle. Lisa coordinated supply chains with urgency. She rerouted trucks, updated delivery priorities, and tracked resources in real time. Hospitals received emergency medicine automatically. Shelters were stocked with water and food. Even in areas where communication was disrupted, systems found ways to function. She marveled at how ordinary planning had become extraordinary. Civilians worked together, following simple instructions, helping those in need. Schools and hospitals reopened in hours, not days, thanks to pre-planned redundancy. In London, water treatment plants that had been threatened by power loss switched automatically to backup generators. Supply trucks, once stuck in traffic, moved efficiently along newly optimized routes. In Tokyo, automated drones helped clear rubble, deliver medical supplies, and restore order. The world had survived, not because humans were perfect, but because they adapted faster than the aliens could destroy. Ethan and Lisa, still unaware of each other, reflected on what had happened. Ethan thought about how minor code changes he had made weeks before had unknowingly helped protect entire neighborhoods. He realized that small efforts, often overlooked, could have enormous consequences. Lisa thought about how every spreadsheet she had managed, every efficiency tweak she had made, had contributed to human survival. She had done nothing extraordinary by normal standards, but in the context of the invasion, she had been essential. Meanwhile, the Carolus fleet fled, scattered, and confused. The aliens communicated in bursts of static and light, unable to understand the outcome. Their centuries of training had failed against a species they had studied for 100 years. The humans had adapted faster than their simulations could predict, improvised better than their tactics accounted for, and survived in ways that defied logic. The careless scholars who survived would spend decades trying to understand the failure, rewriting strategies and doctrines for a species that could not be conquered easily. On Earth, people began to rebuild. Damaged areas were repaired quickly, not just by governments, but by ordinary civilians working together. Communities shared resources, repaired homes, and distributed supplies.